what we know and what I can measure on my force plate on a daily basis is that when people have got cushioning between their feet and the ground, they will land harder. And the science behind this goes back decades, where they found that gymnasts landing on big foam mats, they land harder as if their feet are trying to seek the floor. Where is the ground? Where is the stability? So this has been known for a long time, but we are led to believe that we need to wrap ourselves up in a lot of cotton wool in order to protect ourselves from the impact. And the reality is there should not be excessive impact. If you're moving fluidly and comfortably, that impact doesn't really happen. There is more impact than walking, yes, for sure, because you're coming from being up in the sky, landing with gravity and your body weight. But it doesn't, if you're effective and efficient, it actually is measured to be no more than twice your body weight forces. Whereas if you're inefficient and you're not noticing enough, it can be up to 7 times your body weight.
That was Helen Hall on impact forces, cushioned shoes, and efficient running technique. You're listening to the Just Fly Performance Podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by our longtime sponsor, Simply Faster. There are a lot of sports technology companies out there, but Simply Faster is the only website you can go to that features an online store that covers the bandwidth of training technology, from force plates to timing systems to muscle stimulators and more. Some products of Simply Faster that I use and love include things like the Freelap timing system in K-Box or coaches' favorites such as GymAware. Recently, Simply Faster has added 2 units that as a coach you should definitely take a look at. The first is the Muscle Lab Contact Grid, which is an extremely affordable and portable, step-by-step, literally, system to collect data on jumps, bounds, sprints, agility, hurdle hops, and really as much as your creative mind can imagine. In what used to take a whole runway worth of data collecting strips, the Contact Grid does it all with only 2 small strips that together cover up to 40 meters of sprinting. Ground contact time, step rates, rhythms, and beyond are at your fingertips with this device. Another new unit, the VO2 Master, is an ultra-portable gas exchange analyzer. Don't guess on energy system development when you can get direct insight into VO2 capabilities in relation to specific sports skills, rather than being hooked up to tubes on a treadmill or worse yet, a cycle ergometer to get a VO2 max. Think of the VO2 Master as your own gas exchange lab without the tubes and wires. Deepen your analysis in the specific conditioning preparation of your athletes with the VO2 Master today. These products and incredible customer service make Simply Faster your go-to for your sports technology needs. I'm happy to have partnered with them in sponsoring this podcast. Their support has been tremendous, so check them out today at simplyfaster.com. That's simply with an I, faster.com. Welcome to episode 180 of the Just Fly Performance Podcast. I'm your host, Joel Smith, and our guest today is Helen Hall. Helen is, amongst other things, a running coach, a biomechanist, and an accomplished endurance athlete herself. Helen is the author of the book, Even With Your Shoes On, which is a comprehensive manual on teaching running in a natural manner based on the sensory capabilities of the human body. That book is the reason that I initially found Helen. I saw it was recommended by Gary Ward. Gary, who is an expert in human biomechanics, anatomy, as well as the feet and pronation. And I really wanted to see, Gary having recommended this, a look at a work combining some of Gary's principles with an athletic movement, gait and running. And I was totally blown away by the book. It was something that really tied a lot of concepts together for me. A lot of these concepts being things like building, we talk about the term function dictate or structure dictating function, or the structural capabilities of the human body dictating the technique, which we could expand to, if you read the book, the structural and the ability of our body to sense and engage our own structure to create a technique in how we run. And so on the show today, and let me get to this first before I talk about the topics that Helen and I are going to dig into, is that running tends to get a little bit of a bad rap, especially in the fitness and especially in the strength and conditioning, sports performance community. And it's one of those things where there's certain categories and buckets. It's like running, stretching. There's these things that's like just, it's bad for you, don't do it. at the end of the day, a lot of things are in shades of gray. But in terms of running, as Helen will very well address in our very first question, is this is something we are naturally born to do. And compared to the animals, we're actually really good at it. Whereas you'll see like a tiger jump or something, and they can jump like 5 feet in the air, and we can't come close, 5 feet vertically. But we're really good endurance runners. And so why is it that so many people get hurt doing this when running as a form of fitness is the most common thing? All right, so on the show today, Helen and I are going to get into running as a natural form of exercise, and then into the important questions of how a person can find their own best running technique through a process of noticing rather than hardline rigid cues. Helen's going to then get into the idea of activating and moving joints as a superior training technique, warm up, priming exercise versus concentric muscle activation, i.e., basically doing joint mobilizations versus clamshells and body weight glute bridges and things like that. She's going to talk about utilizing lunge variations and variations of lunges to see if runners can optimally activate their glutes. She's going to talk about an awareness-based running paradigm, going from a sagittal, frontal, and transverse plane sequence rather than a quote-unquote do this, run like this sequence. So using a series of noticing and awareness exercises to help athletes self-organize running on their own versus just simply giving them cues and ideas. Finally, she's going to talk about how to optimize the running posture using wall-based alignments. And she's also going to go into how to fix crossover gait and optimize one's tracking width while running, which goes beyond even running too. I watch athletes doing hurdle hops and various motions, and you see tracking width issues show up. How you do anything is how you do everything. So in terms of just getting athletes to move better, be more injury resistant and beyond. And if you work with anyone in the general running community, this is a huge plus. This is a great episode. It is incredibly in-depth. And I'm happy to have Helen on the show today. All right. Last thing before we get to it, by the way, is there's a few exercises that go with what Helen's talking about. So if you're curious what some of these drills look like, these awareness, noticing, joint movement-based drills, head on over to Just Fly Sports, check out the show notes, and there are 8 videos there that are going to go in depth on these things. All right. That being said, let's get on to the show with Helen Hall. So with running, and I think this is, to me, I love running. My background and I'm a track in the speed and power side of things, the jumps and sprints and all that. But at the same time, like human gait is human gait. Like, and I think that a lot of people it's something to really be appreciated. And I think not only that, but just the fact of how big it is in the fitness space. And one of the books that I read recently, and it kind of, my thinking has been turning in the sense that I used to be a little bit more of running is a really poor form of fitness. If you do distance running, it's going to make you X, Y, and Z, and you're going to get hurt and all these things. And a lot of people certainly do. So I want to ask you this, and obviously the book came out with Christopher McDougall and Born to Run, but are we born to run? And why do people look so down so much on running as a form of exercise?
They do, don't they? It's weird. So I passionately believe we're born to run because toddlers are at it before they even really can walk well. And I giggle when we hear stories about the first steps. And then when the toddler is putting quite a few steps together, there's no applause. And when they go into their first trot, there's absolutely no applause at all, but they're running. It's just another pace. When one foot is still on the ground, it's a walking gait. And if there's no feet on the ground at some point and then a foot comes down because we're not birds, then it's running. So it's just another speed, another gear. So absolutely, one foot in front of the other at a whole array of different speeds is what we do. That's what human beings do best, in my opinion. And going further and going long is what we do best of all, because not stopping is in our enduring evolutionary history, just keeping going until we can stop. So, yeah, I think we're born to run, and I think that the reasons it's looked down on, because you're absolutely right, it is the propensity of injury And then the connection of a lot of running and a propensity to injury being morphed into a statement that says running injures you. Not running that is injurious, because it is the most natural thing, like walking in the world. You don't have to do anything other than go a little bit faster. But I think that people have become disconnected from the way that they're doing anything. Nobody notices anything. So they put their shoes on and they quite understandably think that all they have to do is run. But if you're doing something repetitively over and over again poorly, so say, as an example, screwing, doing some DIY and screwing with a really, without any attention to the way that you're screwing, if it's at an angle or anything like that, and then you get an RSI injury to the wrist or the elbow, you would actually maybe connect the way that you were doing it to the pain. But with walking and with running, people don't seem to connect the way that they are moving to their pain. They just blame the running per se, just the whole generic thing. So I get people coming to see me. My consultant, my surgeon, says that I mustn't run. And I say, well, okay, he's perhaps missed a word. Don't run badly. Don't run meanly. Don't be mean to your body when you run. Run, but don't be mean. So let's have a look at why. Notice how you're walking, how you're running. And maybe if you notice something that's a little bit mean, then you can correct that.
I couldn't agree more. And I love that anecdote of people notice things with their upper body and your hands much more quickly than you would ever notice with your feet. And that's the story of my life. I know the first time I was in Colorado last year, and Steven Sashin of Zero Shoes gave me a pair of like minimal barefoot style trail shoes. And I went out running in the mountains of Colorado, and it was just unbelievable how, like, you pick up, I mean, and let alone actually running barefoot, but it was an amazing experience, like how much my feet were picking up every little rock and stone and things like that. And you think of the I think it's the Tarahumara, I'm probably mispronouncing it, but the tribe that runs in the minimalist sandals, the homemade sandals, basically. And
yeah, you were right, Tarahumara, yeah.
Yeah, and I could agree more that it's running badly. And I think that I don't blame anyone for saying, well, distance running is bad when you go and see the local half marathon and see how, 9 out of 10 or 19 out of 20 people run by, which is more of like, it's kind of like more of a slog death march type movement than it is like joyful, active, sensory running where you're actually feeling what you're doing. And I know we'll get to a lot of this stuff as we go forward, but even the idea of just you're wearing cushioned shoes and flat pavement and everything else that goes with that versus having children myself, and you watch them run on the playground and it's just like the easiest thing in the world, and you could just extrapolate that out for however long they wanted to run before they got tired of their aerobic system or whatever it was. And so it definitely makes so much sense to me. One of the things that I think is I'd like to get to is we talk about run technique. Like if someone's, and you said this to sense and feel. And so if someone is running incorrectly, and I think this could, and for everyone listening, is not just distance running, this could go to all types of running and sprinting and movement. But what's your thought process with helping someone to find a running technique that they won't get hurt and find the joy of running and be their best self in the form of running?
Yeah. So the other thing that, just to backtrack slightly in order to answer that question fully, when they run and they get injured, the question is it how their body wants to run, or is it what they think that they ought to be doing because they've read something or they've been told something, they've Googled something, or they've seen something, or they're mimicking something. So if it's not what their body actually wants to do, but it's being inflicted on them, being inflicted on the body by an opinion, their opinion, their perceived opinion, somebody else's opinion, then it's quite possible that the body might not like it. And if we go back to notice what our body is happy doing, then we're probably going to be able to go through the gears more effectively, without pain and injury, and enjoy it more. So it's not about telling people how to, because that boils down to an opinion again. And that, I think, is part of the problem that is out there, that is rampant, that you run like this, or you lean forward, or you don't lean forward, or you pick your feet up, or you pick your knees up, or you land here, or you land there. And there's a lot of confusion, because so many of these guidelines contradict each other. So then you start to think about, well, how much of the way that I'm running is down to how I think I ought to be running, instead of how I actually run. How can I run? So when people say, just like you have just asked, correcting, I want to see if I'm running right. Can you correct my run technique? Can you tell me how to run? And I will start by exploring, well, how do you walk? And then when you go from your walk into your run, what changes? So sometimes people's where they make first contact doesn't change. So they walk rolling from heel to toe, and then they move into their run, and they're still rolling from heel to toe. So then the question is, if they've got a lot of injuries, is the first contact on the heel part of the story? Because what we know, and what I can measure on my force plate on a daily basis, is that when people have got cushioning between their feet and the ground, they will land harder. And the science behind this goes back decades, where they found that gymnasts landing on big foam mats, they land harder, as if their feet are trying to seek the floor. Where is the ground? Where is the stability? So this has been known for a long time, but we are led to believe that we need to wrap ourselves up in a lot of cotton wool in order to protect ourselves from the impact. And the reality is, there should not be excessive impact. If you're moving fluidly and comfortably, that impact doesn't really happen. There is more impact than walking, yes, for sure, because you're coming from being up in the sky, landing with gravity and your body weight. But it doesn't, if you're effective and efficient, it actually is measured to be no more than twice your body weight forces. Whereas if you're inefficient and you're not noticing enough, it can be up to 7 times your body weight, which over a period of time, that would give you the RSI that the screwing in with the screwdriver gave you overnight. Repetitively, that's going to eventually have an impact. So how to go about correcting running technique is it starts with noticing, well, what do you do? As a hopefully a highlighting example of this is, at the beginning of a workshop, I will always start with, okay, hands up, who knows that they land on their rear foot first, and there'll be a smattering of hands that go up, and then there'll be, okay, who lands not on their heels, somewhere in front of their heels, and another smattering of hands go up. And then the question is, who doesn't know where they land? And then more hands than anybody else go up. And then I say, okay, keep your hands up if you've been injured and you've connected your injury to running. And of course, the hands stay up. So if you don't even know where you are landing repetitively over and over again, is it any wonder that you end up being injured? You're simply not noticing things until things are broken. And you may have noticed things along the way getting more and more painful, but because you've heard that running hurts, right? That pain and running, they go together like a horse and carriage. That's normal. So they accept the pain as a normal part of the running experience. And in my experience, no, it's not. Pain is an indication that something is wrong, and your brain is trying to ask you to change stuff or stop for a minute and just see what's going on. And the ignoring the pain because they accept it, they think it's part of the story, leads them to the injury.
So essentially, if I had to kind of summarize that, you're saying that it's the people. No, people just don't pay attention to how they run, and you start from a sensory, like teaching them to feel and teaching them to sense, rather than saying. And I see this in track too all the time. In the, someone, and I love how you said, how does it change when they walk to when they run? Because walking, because nobody has the preconceived, constructed version of how to walk. Generally, they just walk how they walk. But as soon as they run, then all the manufactured stuff starts to hit. And I've never even I've read your whole book, and I'm sure I remember reading that somewhere, but I'm glad you mentioned that again, because it just makes so much sense. It's like, when does this become manufactured, something that's artificial? And as soon as it does, it's laying the grounds for something, for suboptimal movement to happen. And so when in terms of how do you teach people to run sensing? And I know we're going to get to this in like the sagittal plane and frontal plane, but how do you teach people to sense their body better? Like, what's the progression that goes with that in terms of someone who's running is off and they've been injured? Where do you start? And I guess like you said, the heel, and just, do you even do it? But what's the basic progression for teaching them to run in a natural way, the way their body would want to move?
Well, I deliberately named the book Even With Your Shoes On, because I didn't want it to be about barefoot. I am passionate about not having much on my feet. I prefer it, but I don't want that to be, I don't think it should be the be all and end all. If you want to have something on your feet and you want to have cushioning on your feet for whatever reason, it shouldn't preclude you from being able to feel and sense what's going on in your body. So if somebody is not aware of what they're doing, all they have to do is jump on the spot. So I will always start with okay, well, you don't know where you land, just jump on the spot. So now you've got 2 feet telling you exactly where they're landing, and 100% of the hundreds and thousands, I don't know how many people I have ever had involvement with running, they have always landed not on their heel. When they jump up and down on the spot, they land somewhere in front of the heel. And they haven't decided where in front of the heel, it's just somewhere in front of the heel. And then I ask them, okay, try and land on the heel. And they can't. Your central nervous system self-protects, and you jump up and down on the spot, and you try and land on your heel, and your body will just protect you every single time. And if you do manage by going from one foot to the other, so you're not really coming from up in the sky to down on 2 heels together, but you can kind of manage it from one foot to the other with not very much air time, you'll actually find it's really lumpy and uncomfortable, and you don't really want to continue. So that alone tends to send a seed of thought of, wow, I hadn't even noticed that. And then the noticing theme is easy. It's just finding the way in to start the noticing process. Once that's started, it's easy. Then they start noticing all sorts of stuff, particularly in any other runner they see. So from not noticing anything about runners to then in the first session with somebody, they'll see another running past and they'll say, oh, look at their, whatever they've just noticed. Look at their elbow poking out. Look at his leg. It's out to the side. Or look, they look like a banana. And they have never noticed that before. But the starting of the noticing just sows this seed that sprouts and creates this great crop practically instantly. So it's not difficult. It's an exponential curve. There's no way that this has ever been linear. People just start soaking it up and then changing things internally because it feels better.
You're listening to the Just Fly Performance Podcast, brought to you by Simply Faster. Yeah, I love it. And I think about how many coaches, I wasn't exposed to a coach who worked on the basis of noticing. Well, the first time ever was in reading Timothy Gallwey's Inner Game of Tennis, where he would teach people to play tennis more by just noticing. Notice how the ball is spinning, or notice how it sounds coming off your racket rather than hardline cues. And I think there's a lot of different ways to coach tennis. I think that way, it definitely worked really well for people who were like, I think a big population he worked with was like the wives of like wealthy businessmen who would try to play tennis with their husbands. I think they were trying to be coached into it, swing like this, and just got frustrated. And then it became, well, just notice how the ball hits and everything would improve dramatically. And I know there's a few different schools of thought on. Brad Gilbert wrote a book called Winning Ugly, which was the opposite, which is a very strategic and tactical. And obviously in a game, like in a ball game, there's a lot of different sides to it. And in something as pure as running, which isn't really as much, I think there's not as much the strategy element. I mean, there's different types of coaching. There is the do this and do this. And that's like, I feel like that's 95 to 98% of coaching is more on doing than noticing. I was about to say, I wasn't exposed to a coach who taught me to notice till about 3-4 years ago, and I'm 36. And so it's definitely the minority. I'm trying to even think of where I was getting with that question. I just think it's so important to teach people that. Here's what I was going to ask: is would you ever, in the process of working with a runner, ever say, well, maybe you should look more like X, Y, and Z, or is it entirely driven through a series of or I guess I know with the drills, like the Amazonian hunchback, there is there's a guideline or a guidepost, but is there ever room for, I guess, what we could call internal cues in your system, where we tell an athlete, well, let's maybe look a little bit more like this, or look at this runner and think about does that play a role at all in your system, or do you have any thoughts on those types of ideas or coaching instructions?
I tend to, if I feel as if I say to somebody, make those same shapes that you see somebody else make, they are doing something. And it's the doing instead of the letting that messes with the timing. You've got 200 milliseconds for an amazing array of joint actions, catapult loadings, and recoils to happen. If you poke your finger in with a doing because you're trying to make something happen instead of let what was going to happen, you mess with the timing and things start to go slightly awry towards very awry. I started going back to age 12 down the back lane. It started by being curious as to, crikey. When I did that, it felt easier. Oh, when I did that, it felt harder. Oh, yeah. And I grew my awareness of I could have more speed for less effort when I was a teenager, just because there was nobody there to do any coaching. Coaching doesn't even exist then. This was late 70s, mid to late 70s. When running, jogging was only just, I don't think it had arrived in the UK at all. It might have been in America, but it wasn't in the UK. So this was just running, just for the, just getting out and playing and having freedom. And just picking up on that lovely story about noticing the sound a ball makes, you can even notice the effort level that you're in, the zone that you're in. Instead of relying on a gadget telling you the zone you're in, you can listen to the sound of your breathing, and that will tell you where you are. And I have watched competitors in transition faffing around trying to pair their Garmin to their heart rate monitor so that they didn't go over the zone that they were meant to be in to complete the endurance challenge, instead of having the internal awareness of what that effort level should have felt like. They were there in 10 minutes in transition trying to pair a gadget. And all you have to do is listen. So when you are in Uber Easy, your vision is panoramic. You can tap into all of your senses. Your vision will be panoramic, and the sound of your breathing will be quieter than the birds and the planes overhead and the wind and the traffic. And then gradually, as your gears go up and your zones change, the level of intensity of training changes, then there'll be a proportionate amount of your breathing getting louder, your vision getting more tunneled, and then finally being in tunnel vision, which is the exciting, that so exciting place to run, where you're on the edge of your aerobic limits. To go faster, it is self-limiting because it becomes anaerobic, but the sound of your breathing, your regular breathing, which hasn't become irregular yet, is the strongest noise, the loudest noise. You can't hear the traffic or the wind. It's just you and your breath. And it's exciting. It's an exciting place to be, because you know that just that little bit too much more effort and it's all going to go raggedy. So yeah, it's deep internal knowledge rather than external. With external guidance, the guidance from outside is not the problem. It's the guidance I feel telling somebody to do something, rather than asking that person to let something happen or feel for something happening. What does that feel like? When you let this happen, what does that feel like? So I might say, let your legs dangle. What does that feel like? And if I see in front of me that accesses the whole breadth of their foot rather than just one edge of their foot, then I know that they're going to get access to more of their foot. So what does that feel like? They let something happen. What does that feel like? Okay, take that internal awareness away home with you and practice that. They're not doing anything. They're just letting something happen with a connection to the feeling, so that then that becomes a new motor program.
I love that stuff. And something that's resonated with me that I've learned through some of the athletes I've worked with is I took on working with swimmers really for the first time about 7 years ago. And something I've slowly started to learn over time is the best underwater kickers in swimming. I've had discussions with some of these people. I've been able to work with some of the best in the world in this regard. And I've asked them, like, well, was this something that you were really coached into, or was it something that you just, through your own awareness and just over time, just feeling the water and figuring it out and through awareness? And it's more just the continual meticulous practice on their own end, feeling and becoming aware and understanding, because it's such a complex, the act of kicking underwater in the water environment is such a complex thing. It's like Bruce Lee famous for saying, I think you can never figure out how to swim until you jump in the water. Like, someone could tell you all the instructions in the world. I think even versus our upright running is a complex movement enough, but then water, you have all this tension and different angles. And I've definitely become aware of how much the self-awareness component is so critical of that. And then, of course, in human movement too, it's something that I feel like, and just how you mentioned too, I love how you talked about the technology element of it. I do agree that some feedback is clearly important, but one of the biggest memories I had when I was a track and cross country coach at Wilmington College for 4 years. But as a cross country coach, it was more like the guy that holds the stopwatch and tells people their splits every now and then. But everyone would always go out with their watch, and I really remember one conference championship where our top runner, he basically, like, I remember him like physically like throwing his watch off of himself, like right when he started, because he didn't want to have to look at the time or think about his pace or anything. Like, he just wanted to run with the leaders. He had 3 or 4 guys in front of him, and he just threw his watch off, didn't want to think about pace or anything else. And he had by far the race of his life, best time, best finish in the conference. And I'm continually reminded of those, our own, even like the idea of we live in such a technological society. Everything is monitored. There's an app for anything. It's almost like our intuition is slowly being, I think that some of those things for establishing a baseline can be good and getting you familiar, but it's almost as if our internal intuition and human power is slowly being taken away in that regard. It's our ability to sense ourselves. And I'm continually reminded of that. And just how you mentioned that, I think it's just such an important point, not just running, but really everything, I
think that it's the order of things. The tech isn't the answer, but marrying the sense to the tech so that you have data, so that this sense of intensity equals that heart rate. Well, that can be really useful information when that same sense of effort has a higher heart rate And then you might think, because you are marrying the internal senses with the availability of tech, and you think, well, why is that? Did I sleep well? Am I hydrated well? Maybe I'm going down with something. So it's not, I am tech queen in my clinic here. I've got the most advanced gait analysis technology in the world. I'm only the third person to have this machine. So I'm not anti-tech at all, but it's so important to get it the right way around. The tech supports what we do. It doesn't dictate. And there's a lovely story in the book Peak by Anders Ericsson, where he talks about an athlete who was trying to get this 4-minute mile, and he knew his splits. And if he wasn't on it with his splits, it was all going to go to a bag of worms. And then one day he decided he was going to rely on his mate by the side of the track, rather than keep looking at his watch, wondering if looking at his watch was changing his form, which of course it is. I see people run with chicken wings because they're so used to looking at their watch, their elbow is always out at the ready. So yes, of course it's affecting form. So he had this friend trackside who was guiding him with his yay and you need to speed up or slow down or whatever coding they had. And his mate got it all wrong. And he thought, well, I'm ahead. Well, that doesn't feel like I'm ahead. Blimey, I must be feeling good. And he went on to nail that which he never had managed before because his mate got it wrong. He had a sense of, blimey, that feels easy, floated into less strain and effort trying, and achieved the fastest time he'd ever managed without ever looking at his watch, and with a complete change of perception in his head about what was necessary.
I love those stories. Like just to have that intuitive sense, or like even just the to be a pacemaker, the art of pacemaking yourself. Like I always felt like that was something in college that I wanted to be good at, internally knowing how to fast to run each sprint without overdoing it. My goal whenever I ran 200s or 300s as a jumper was to never over sprint those, because I didn't want to have negative effects from those that would affect my power days. And I would always see other teammates just blow it out of the water on a few of them. And like, I've always seen these athletes who have like no sense of what the time is, and just to cultivate that internal sense, I think is important. But I also did want to bring it back quickly to, you mentioned how there is, I mean, tech is not bad. Like it's important for feedback. I know something I'll always remember is Tony Holler, who's been on this, a sprint coach from Illinois, who's been on the show a few times, has talked about doing a flying 10-meter sprint with athletes where they get a gradual acceleration, then sprint as fast as they can for 10 meters through a series of gates, and they get a time. And that time is really important because he says he sees athletes trying something subtly different every time. And the time just tells them, I think you mentioned something similar to this a little earlier, like the time tells you if you were successful or not, that thing you tried. But I think it's also important that thing they tried isn't necessarily something the coach told them to do. They kind of maybe were creative and thought of it a little bit on themselves. They get instant feedback. They try something again, a little subtly different. I think we all do that to a degree, but to rely on it whole, like for everything, you lose that sense of intuition and awareness. It's like there is to understand how, I guess, those two can separate I think is important.
Mm. It's a similar thing. The disconnect from the ground, the feet to the ground, we've become disconnected there, and then we've become disconnected to the internal sensory guidelines because of the advancement of tech. And it's simply bring it all back together again. Have the tech, but have the sensory guidelines internally. Have the shoes, but maybe have something that doesn't squish your shoes, squish your feet much. Maybe just something less fettering, less restricting. The same as a heart rate monitor. If you have it really tight so it doesn't fall down, is that actually impeding your breathing mechanism? Are you restricting your ribcage movement? All of these things are important noticings. It's not just what you're feeling inside your body, it's how your external gadgets, clothing, footwear, all of these things are affecting the way that your body is moving. And all of these are on the table. They are all little efficiency pockets waiting to be explored and used, to your advantage.
Yeah, right on. It reminds me of, and maybe we can talk about this later, but the Lemny device that you talk about in your book is it's like a tech, but a piece of feedback at the same time. So I do, before I get to that, I want to get to my next question for you, which is something that I love this acronym in your book. It's WJWM, or WJWUM. Can you?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Can you tell me what does that stand for, and why does that supersede what we would call muscle activation, or activate your glutes when preparing athletes to run, train, or whatever they're doing?
Yeah, lovely. WJWM. WJWM means wake up joints to wake up muscles. And it comes from Gary Ward's work, The Body of Work, Anatomy and Motion, where he talks about joints act and muscles react. In the field of gravity, it's the movement of the joints that creates a response in the soft tissue. And the movement of the joints, there's so many joints crossed by swathes of soft tissue. So there's many ways to skin a cat. If you are contracting a muscle rather than thinking about a joint movement, the contraction of the muscle as you move affects the timing of what you're trying to do. So if you're, for instance, that I hear that the glute activation all the time, activate your glutes as you run. Well, if you start to squeeze your glutes with every stride, you actually, apart from messing with your timing, you actually will break yourself. You will break. Hauling ass is a great way of stopping. So one, on level 9, when you're flying downhill, you learn to squeeze one butt cheek and then the other in close succession, and you will grind to a great big halt. So you got to be careful what muscles you're thinking about activating. Statically in the gym is one thing. In motion, to activate a muscle, to contract a muscle, actually because it's now too slow. You've put the brake on everything because it's too slow. Whereas if you know that the muscle gets activated when a joint moves, you can rely on that muscle activation happening, because as you move, the joint is moving. So the WJWMs are standing still drills where you focus on the joint movement to access the muscular loading, to then notice whether or not the joint even moves. Because if you discover in a standing drill when you're paying attention to a joint moving, which is actually easier than sensing, because some people activate your tricep. Well, they won't really know what to do to activate their tricep. But if you ask them to extend their elbow, they can extend their elbow. So the language becomes easier for the person to channel the energy into the right area to get the result that they're after. So the WJWMs are shapes that the body should be able to make, because of the joint articulations are binary, where the shapes we make are directly dictated to by the joint articulations, which are just as they are. It's the bone ends on bone ends, and it's 3-dimensional, and it's black and white, and we stand on nice solid ground there. Muscles that cross more than one joint, it becomes quite complicated. What are you wanting the hip to extend or to flex? Are we having some external rotation or some internal rotation? This is 3-dimensional. With the muscle, you can, and if you just focus on the joint in its 3 dimensions, it's just much simpler. And by doing it in order, in the sagittal plane, side view, in the frontal plane, when you're looking from either the front of the body or the back of the body with movement left to right, or twisting things, if you can focus in on a movement of a joint in a plane, and ask the question, is it moving? Because if I then know what muscles cross that joint, and I now know that those joints aren't really moving, and when I put the whole body together, some aren't and some aren't, you can get a real feel of what muscles are able to fire in 200 milliseconds, because that's the time they need to fire in with each footfall. And if it's not happening in slow-mo, it's never happening when you're moving. Even walking, it's only 600 milliseconds. So it's a way of finding out if the muscle is ever able to activate. So I see runners who come in, their glutes are like little peaches up by their ears. They're fantastic, but their pelvis never moves when they run. So their glutes are never firing, even though the muscle is there ready to work because they've done all of the clams and the crab walking and whatever else. They're not actually utilizing the potential that is there waiting for them to grab and run with, because the pelvis isn't moving. Therefore, the joint, the joint between the pelvis and the thigh bone is only moving to a degree, not to its wholeness. So we haven't got the complete activation of that muscle. Did that answer your question? That was a very long explanation.
Yeah, no, it definitely did. But I'd like to maybe ask a couple little clarifying questions. And then I know we're going to get into like the sagittal plane, frontal plane, transverse plane model of teaching, which is just phenomenal. But I think that very simply, that is definitely, that principle has definitely manifested itself in how I warm up athletes, rather than, I think about 7 years ago, I was probably on more the traditional methods of things. Let's do some clamshells and some glute marches and this, that, and the other. That is all like concentric based muscle activity. It's not something that fits with joint movement. Whereas now everything is a variation of a crawl and a lunge and a crouch walk and things where the joints are always moving. And it's like, because that type of stuff, not only does that get the muscles working, but it also acts as a real-time screen. Like if someone is doing a crouch walk or a lunge and they can't get any internal rotation, they're super externally rotated, or a crouch walk and they can't stay upright with their torso, or they're crawling and there's no like frontal plane rib motion. These things are they're screens as well. And if they're not doing those things, working the muscle associated with that movement, I don't know how effective that's going to be, because they can't move. And so so let's just say maybe could we use a lunge as an example? And I know you have a lot of lunge variations in your book, and in the different like wujwums and the cogs, I think they're called. So how would you use a lunge to see if an athlete was able to utilize their glutes in the course of running, just as an example for what you're talking about?
So if a runner if I see a runner not moving their pelvis, so they're running, but the pelvis doesn't move. The legs move backwards and forwards, but the pelvis doesn't do anything. It doesn't seesaw. There's no rotation. There's no butt cheek swap. Then they have no idea of the fact that their pelvis isn't moving. Then I might use one of the lunge cogs or wujwums. So there's a wujwum tends to go to end range, and a cog or any kind of drill. It doesn't find that moment of pregnant pause before you get the recoil. So there's a slight difference throughout the book whether or not we're finding that moment of catapult recoil, or whether we're just opening a joint out to explore the three-dimensional muscle activation. So a lunge is invariably used as a way to, in 3 dimensions, wake up whatever muscle group happens to be crossing it. And of course, it's going to be the glutes in a lunge. So we can slow down a lunge position to make sure that we have everything that we need to fire the glutes. So if the glutes, when they contract, they extend the hip. So we need to flex the hip to load it. The glutes abduct the hip. So we need to adduct the hip to load it. the glutes externally rotate the hip, so we need to internally rotate the hip to load it. So if we can access internal rotation, adduction, and hip flexion in a position that is comfortable towards end range, but not reaching that moment of recoil, because this isn't gait now, this is just a position, a shape that we're making, then after a few of those, if we then compare a before and after, we should be able to see and the person feel the change in their muscle activation. So there'll be a run up and down, and I'll think, oh, that's not moving. So we'll find a drill that loads that muscle tissue that is crossing that bone that isn't moving. We'll find that in 3 dimensions, and then they'll run up and down again and be fueled by a muscle that's now woken up because we woke the joints up. And they will feel the difference. They don't have to activate the muscle. The muscle has been activated by the fact that you've moved the joint in a sympathetic 3-dimensional way in order to load the muscle sympathetically in terms of nicely, constructively, not meanly, productively, in the way that it's meant to be used and moved.
You're listening to the Just Fly Performance Podcast, brought to you by Simply Faster. Yeah, I like how you pair sensory work with the drill or the run itself. I think a lot of times we tend to silo out. A lot of training means we say, okay, well, let's do all these exercises in one canister, and then just you do your sport in another. And I think for a lot of athletes that works out fine. But I think that it doesn't really cultivate awareness, and we can't check if what we're doing is effective or not. We just kind of hope it all transfers over in a way. And granted, it's not always, if for those coaches who are working with large groups, that's not necessarily the easiest thing to do, if not impossible in some cases. But I like in being able to work in the finer points and one-on-ones to be able to use those sensory movements and see if it makes a difference. And I like to get into... I know it's hard to describe some of these movements on audio only. It's one of those things where PowerPoint presentation, here's a video, and maybe we can describe it as best we can. But I would like to spend the last little bit of this show talking about how you go through that sagittal plane, frontal plane, transverse plane assessment, and then how you use some interventions. And I know we probably, if to not have this be a 3-hour episode, we probably have to be a little bit brief. But and that the whole sagittal, frontal, transverse thing, I think it resonates not just with running, but everything. The first time I heard it, it was maybe even just for the weight room, and I heard Pat Davidson, a trainer here in the States, talking about how we to use that same mentality of mastering the sagittal plane first in the gym, then the frontal plane, and then the transverse, rather than just doing everything at once haphazardly. I've heard people like Mike Robertson, very well known over here, say the same thing. And I think in the gym, this is starting to catch on, which is great. But I think that no one really thinks about it in running. And your book was the first book that I've ever read where I was like, whoa, this is in running too. This is awesome. Like, here's a series and a progression of how to approach this in not just the gym, but human movement itself, but gait itself, like the things that athletes are actually doing in sport. And anyways, so could you take me through how you start with the sagittal plane in allowing someone to notice themselves and be aware better and improve their running, and then maybe take me through the planes with some, I guess we could, as much time as you need, but take me through the planes and how you go about that process.
Okay, so to be constructively helpful here, it's in the gym, historically, sagittal plane movement has dominated. So I've had it said to me that, okay, but everything is sagittal plane. Everything is being dominated by sagittal plane. And it's true. Bicep curls and leg extension, there's lots of sagittal plane. The point with starting with alignment in the sagittal plane, it's more about that. It's not movement in the sagittal plane, it's alignment. So side view alignment, to be as efficient as we can be Because the head is very heavy, it's an eighth of your body weight when you're proportional. If the head can be perched effortlessly on top of the spine with the muscles there to move the head, not to hang on to it, then the head is the pointy bit of the umbrella, and the rib cage is the umbrella over the pelvis underneath it, and then finally the feet on the floor. So it's not about being rigidly upright. It's about being what one of my lovely friends and clients described, erect at ease. So it's finding that place where you're not wasting any energy in stopping yourself face planting, not wasting any energy with a rib cage behind the pelvis running like Roadrunner, which is a brake. So in the side view, looking at a runner and thinking, well, they're hanging on to their head and they have knee pain. So it's, where are the problems? And is the problem in the sagittal plane or the frontal plane? So if somebody comes to me and they tell me that they get headaches, or they get knee pain, or they get repetitive calf strains, or high hammy tendonitis is another common one, then I might think, I wonder what I'm going to see in the sagittal plane. So we'll look at the running, and maybe there's a forward lean. Maybe there's a backward lean, because it goes both ways. So then we can use the sagittal plane alignment to help us reorganize that sense of where upright has actually got to. So the central nervous system thinks that's upright. Does it need to be there? Well, we don't know. We just ask the question. So a fence, a lamppost, a wall, all of these things are very handy. They're all outdoors, and you can use them to get a sense of, well, where is my upright? So that the person just butts their bottom and their rib cage against the wall. You can even leave the head out of it for the moment, just stand there. Is that comfortable without leaning against the wall? So the feet are so much away from the wall that it just is, they're just there. They're not too far, they're not too close. You are just touching the wall, and is that comfortable? For some, just even doing that is uncomfortable. Their pelvis wants to peel off. So suddenly we get some information that actually the pelvis wants to be ahead of the rib cage all the time. Oh, juicy information. And we can start to feed that into some kind of drill. Then say they are comfortable. Their pelvis and their rib cage are aligned against the wall, and they're comfortable. So then can they get their head against the wall? Can they do that effortlessly? Or do they have to tip their head back in order to do that? And actually, it's not very comfortable. Can they just send their skull backwards so that the back of their skull meets the same alignment as the apex of the ribcage curve and the butt cheeks? And for many, they can't, because their head is forward. And that's kind of synonymous with Western living and mobile phones. And, this isn't a lecture on how we should be or shouldn't be. It's just a matter of fact. Lots of people have a forward head because of a lifestyle. But it doesn't matter. We can just note that and think, well, we can help that along. Sometimes a head needs to be forward for the job to be done. But we don't want to stay in that posture. We don't want the posture that we habitually use in our day-to-day life to become the posture from which we have to revolve. So we can always unravel a little bit, and then we can use a sagittal cog to start to mobilize the joints in the sagittal plane to keep things nice and simple, because gait is complex. Everything is happening all at once. Everything is happening in 3 dimensions all at once, and it messes with people's heads. Where do you start? You have to start somewhere, otherwise it's a mess. That's my friend Chris Sridharan always says that, and it just makes sense. We need to not be in a mess, so we need to start somewhere. A wall is a great place to start. Is it comfortable? Can you? And then you do a few drills. So sagittal cog is simply keeping the head and the rib cage and the butt against the wall. Can you lift the chest, or stick your tailbone out, or nod your head? And can everything just cog-like move and create and maintain contact with the wall. Or if you try and maintain contact with the wall, does nothing move? In which case you now know that there isn't sagittal plane movement in those joints. So it's both, as exactly as you beautifully expressed it before, it's a marker and the solution. So you have this way of checking your status, your progress, and making progress at the same time by repetitively meeting resistance, never pushing past, never creating pain, never pushing where your body doesn't want to go, but just inviting, going slow and inviting movement into that area. And then very quickly, people will do a couple of cogs, they'll step away, they'll feel different, they'll take that into their run. I don't even need to tell them to do anything. They just are different and invariably more upright. Their central nervous system has discovered, oh, they quite like that. The central nervous system didn't know that where they were was not effortlessly aligned. It's now discovered more effortlessly aligned. It might still be a work in progress. It doesn't matter. It's better. All we want is better, not right, not wrong, just better. And it's just a simple way of doing that.
I really like how you say that. It's not, there's not, or the idea that there's a perfect, I think really messes with people. Like, oh, this guy's form is perfect. Will you be like that? It's, and I was going to say too, back with as you were talking about the sagittal plane, the American coaches I was mentioning, it was kind of the same thing in the sense of not just training the sagittal plane, but you're optimizing it. You're teaching awareness of it. And in the gym, I think it was more about inhibiting the muscles that are overactive to give you a little better posture and position. And then you can get into frontal. And in those cogs you were mentioning, and I couldn't agree. I think it's such an awesome thing to have athletes do those, because oftentimes the just general lack of awareness of what the spine is doing is pretty astounding. Like, I mean, especially just the feedback that a wall gives you for, like you said, where your body is positioned. And I know it's, and maybe I could put these it'd be great to have one of these in the show notes or something like that. But could you take me through like the Amazonian versus hunchback? Because I think that like athletic posture, or the posture and position, track coaches always talk about the importance of it. But like you said, I do think it's such a center point, because if your head's forward, right, like no rotational or side bending or crossover gait type work is really going to matter at all, right? Like it's because you're not balanced, you're not center. And I know in my work with my mentor here in the States, Darian Barr, the first thing he'll have athletes do is an athletic posture assessment and teaching them that. And so in what does the Amazonian versus hunchback specifically, I know you're against the wall, but what does that entail, and how do you go through it? And I guess you would use that as a before and after running, but how does that specifically unfold?
So by moving the joints in this aligned space and asking if the movement is even possible in the aligned space, of course, you're having a knock-on effect on all the soft tissue that crosses the joints. So at one end of the scale, you're discovering if there's movement at the joints. At the other end of the scale, you're actually firing up muscles that may have gone to sleep, forcing other areas to do more. So it's rarely about stopping anything doing too much. It's all about the balance that is inherently created when you wake up the stuff that was doing nothing. So if I see a crazy arm swing, I never try and inhibit the crazy arm swing. I think, oh, okay, well, that arm isn't swinging at all. Why isn't it swinging? Let's just find a way to create. It might be not swinging because the scap has got stuck, and we'll wind the scap in and out a bit, and then it'll swing, and the other crazy one won't swing as much, because it's always a balance, front, back, left, right. It's always balance. Your body is seeking balance. We do not need to inhibit. We need to wake up, and the inhibition kind of follows invariably. So in the sagittal cog, do you want me to talk through the actual movement? Is that what you'd like?
Oh yeah, please.
Oh, okay. So just before we do that, listeners might want to join in. So if you just lean the torso slightly forward and turn your head to look over your shoulder, don't move your shoulders, but just lean forward a little bit and turn your head and see what your peripheral vision is. You can do this seated, you can do it standing. It doesn't really matter. And then don't lean forward and just kind of imagine that your rib cage is umbrellaing your pelvis. And then turn your head to look over your shoulder, short, and I've got a fused neck. I've got 3 fused C-spine vertebra, and even I can feel that I have a massive improvement in the range of motion when my head isn't forward of its axis. And it's not that there is a perfect alignment. It's just that when the bones are stacked effortlessly, it is in a position for maximal rotation, which is maximum potential, because we are transverse plane rotational mammals in the field of gravity, which is our efficiency above all other mammals. Everybody else has got to bounce around, going up and down or a bit sideways. We can just kind of rotate with hardly any vertical oscillation. But if your rotations are limited, you are instantly less efficient. So with that in mind, having discovered that with your head just hanging in its usual place, you have less rotation in the neck spine than when your head is maybe having a sense of feeling as if it's a little bit further back than usual. But then you can just glance in the mirror and just think, oh, actually, that's just stacked. And discovering that you've got this much more, and for you, your maximal rotation at that point, then you might want to take that further and take it into the entire spine. So to talk you through the drill, you would find a vertical surface against which to stand. Heels don't touch the wall, butt and rib cage do. You want to send the skull as close to the wall as you can. If you can't quite make it because it hurts, don't push it. But just have a horizontal jaw, a relaxed horizontal jaw, and just send the skull backwards until you meet your resistance. Then there's many ways to do it. It's described 5 different ways in the book. So if we just start from the pelvis, and the cog is the tailbone comes up or the pubic bone goes down. A heavy pubic bone is often more comfortable than a tailbone that's light. So the tailbone goes down. The xiphoid process, the little button at the base of the chest, the base of the breastbone, that goes up, and the chin goes down, because wherever the pubic bone goes, so does your nose. That's the easy way to remember it. And if that has happened, what you'll find is if you're with honed awareness, you will have had a slight internal rotation of the thigh bone in the pelvis, in the hip socket, as the pelvis is anteriorly tilted with pubic bone down, which will send the knees into a slight flexion and the foot into a pronation. There are only 2 foot shapes. One is splat, yeti foot, pronation, open joints on the sole and the inside edge, and supination, which is the locked rigid lever off of which we propel, which is 5/7 of the gait cycle if you break the gait cycle into 7 easily identifiable parts. So critically important to be able to supinate, but unless you pronate, you can never move into supination, which is another conversation. But so the end result of Amazonian warrior is a chin that has dropped to a lifting chest because the nose has followed the pubic bone, which has descended, and knees that have come together slightly because of the internal rotation and adduction of the thigh bone in the hip socket, and pronated feet. So we have Amazonian warrior with knock knees. That's the way to remember the whole movement. And then if we go the other way, we let all of that tension go, and then we go the other way. So now the tailbone is heavy. So you're sliding the tailbone down against the wall. And that should send the top of the pelvis backwards, which will pull the lumbar spine, the lower back, flatter. It may reach the wall, it may not, depending on your mobility. And then the pubic bone is going up because the tailbone is going down, which will pull the xiphoid process, the knobbly bit at the bottom of the breastbone. It pulls it together. So this is your huge ab loading. This is spinal flexion, big ab crunch. It starts the journey of magnificent oblique action once we have transverse plane. So this is where you want to access your ab contraction in spinal flexion. But then everybody is doing it with their hands behind their head, cranking their head up. And actually, in spine mechanics, at this moment, when the pubic bone has come up and the xiphoid process has gone down and the rib cage has tipped forwards, the head has tipped back. So we're in C-spine extension. So when people are doing the ab crunches to create their six-pack, invariably their heads are all going the wrong way. And so, neck muscles are strained and mechanics are messed with, and it's just being mindful. It's being kind. Don't be mean. Just really don't be mean. So the head should have tipped back. So at this point, the head is tipped back. So you've got contact on the wall towards the crown of the head. You'll have mid-back contact with the flexion of the spine, with the shoulders having peeled off the wall. The back wall of the pelvis and or the lower lumbars are in contact. And now the posterior tilt of the pelvis will have externally rotated the thigh bone. The knee will have straightened, and now you'll be on the outside of the heels rather than the inside of the heels, and the foot will have supinated. So now we have Amazon. We've gone from Amazonian warrior with not knees to hunchback with bandy legs or bow legs. So I use evocative language throughout the book to help people remember. Mm-hmm. So Amazonian warrior never seems to have knock knees, but here with great spine mechanics, he definitely has knock knees. And hunchback, who perhaps would previously have been drawn as a cartoon, the slouched person with the knock knees. No. The slouch is, and you need to be able to do a really good slouch to have great spine mechanics. The slouch should have bandy legs with the knees traveling away from each other and the weight more on the outside of the heel. And you can just move in and out of that space. And every time you do it, if you do 3, the first one is, crikey, this is a coordination issue. The second will be better. And the third will always be best. And you don't do it too many times, because then you'll lose focus and you'll just be practicing rubbish and bypassing joints.
Yeah, I like the detailed description. I think the very rough description of it to a degree is you could just say you're doing kind of the cat-cow as the wall with feedback, but I like how those little fine details I think are really important because like the abs especially.
Glad you said that, because the cat-cow, the head goes the wrong way.
Yeah.
So you could do cat-cow and then switch the head up. So the cat, the head normally is going down, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And the cow, the head is going up. So the cat, the head tips back. So the cat sees where he's going. And the cow, I'm just making it up. The cow needs to eat grass. So the cow's head, the neck needs to be in flexion for cow. If you do cat cow.
Yeah, I think that's really important. It takes me back to when, and I see this occasionally with swimmers, especially perhaps backstrokers. And then I've also heard Douglas Heel, founder of Be Activated, talk about how Pilates instructors oftentimes have extremely tense necks and cervical neck muscles because they're pairing neck flexion with the ab crunch. And I like in your book, and just this idea that, and Darian Barr has mentioned it too, this idea that you can find, if you run right and run well, you can find the muscle of activation you're seeking in running. You can get abs, you can get glutes. You don't need to sit there and do, and I don't think a little bit of ab work is bad by any means, as long as it's not producing poor patterns, which it easily, I have seen it, overactivate the neck for sure. But I love the idea of how when you have the posture awareness and it fits and it works correctly, you're getting these things out of running. And then if you sprint, you're amplifying it. And then we get some of the muscles we see on sprinters that we think are great, and they are. It's like, well, did that sprinter get those glutes in the squat rack, or do they get it by sprinting and they're activating the muscles the correct way? I mean, I don't think the squat rack is bad by any means. They can work together, but you have to have the basic activation there, or the basic posture to get the muscles you want. And I think with the abs, that's always been the trick. That's the thing I'm always kind of trying to continue to learn and wrap my head around, is how do we feel abs activating more correctly in the movement? And I think you kind of answered my question a little bit there, in the sense of well, what pairs with what? Because you don't want to get if you're in the wrong position, then it's not going to be optimal.
Yeah, so you got the eccentric loading of rectus abdominis in Amazonian or cow, and then the concentric contraction in cat, and then the obliques come in with the transverse plane. And of course, in gait, whether you're walking or running, if you're upright, you have this optimal loading of the abdominal wall, with the anterior tilt of the pelvis pushing your innards against the abdominal wall, creating the need for the abdominal wall to contract. And you've got the counter rotation between the pelvis and the rib cage firing the obliques. There's no need to do anything else. If you're moving in the field of gravity at whatever pace, whatever intensity, with all of your ab muscles always firing, always, every single step they have to fire, and they're switching between all the time continually. So when I'm lean, I have an 8-pack, which isn't particularly nice on a girl, but it's there because it's always having to be fired with every step I take. It's just there.
Yeah, it's the ultimate. The way the body moves naturally is the ultimate medicine. It's the ultimate exercise. I think we just try to reverse aesthetic everything, and as this whole episode has gone, it does take some intention and willpower and desire to notice to get this stuff to work, because it is simple, but it's also very complex as you get into it. And that's why to me, I love this stuff, and it's worth the effort to go through, because the end result is just so profound. I have one more quick question for you before our time is up, and I know this could probably be an hour question, but I really appreciate how you've been able to take such complex ideas and boil it down to fairly short time frames in context of, I think, what could be. But crossover running is a big thing. So frontal plane, so you have the sagittal plane and the Amazonian and hunchback, and then so the frontal plane, I think we talk a lot about in the track community. There's a lot of the crossover running, where if you're running on a track line, the feet would be too narrow or almost stepping over each other in that frontal plane. What are your thoughts on that, and what are some sensory drills and ideas that we can use to start to remedy that type of thing?
Yeah, it's I see it in a lot of track runners. If there is crossover, if you watch the pelvis move, there will be probably very little hike drop, very little seesaw of the pelvis, and very little rotation. So once again, it boils down to the pelvis isn't moving. And if you run and you deliberately block the pelvis from any rotation, you kind of end up, the rotation will come from the knee down. So the legs will dish around and form almost a knock-kneed look, which is derived, if one thing doesn't move, something else is going to have to move more. So there's two things with crossover runners. There's a knock-kneed dishing around of the lower leg, and literally a V-shaped leg from the hip, where they're running on the outsides of their feet. So they're never accessing the ball of the foot. So these people tend to have IT band issues. They tend to have knee issues, as well as the dishing around with the knees going inwards runners. They also tend to have a lot of lateral shin issues, outside ankle sprain issues, and the question is always, well, why are you even aware? Do you even do you know that you're using the full breadth of your foot? So there are many reasons why somebody might be doing that, and it's to do with closing a groin, because there might be an appendix scar there. So it's always worthwhile looking at scars when you see crossover running. Always check scars, especially around the groin, even if it's an old appendix scar. Lost my train of thought. So check the scars. So it can be a closing, or it can be a lack of awareness of the full breadth of the foot, which is really common because people have a perception that they need to be running on the outsides of the feet. Lots of people have a horror of a foot that is anti-pronation devices. Orthotic shoes are so endemic in our society that we think that pronation is a bad thing. We think that a foot making full contact with the ground is a bad thing. And so these people they're sort of light on their feet, and they're sprightly, and oh yes, you're light on your feet, but they're simply on the edges. So a really easy way of finding their space, they jump up and down the spot, and I often use, if I've got them, my football sports cones, and if I don't, I'll just find a stone, or I'll take my shoe off, and they'll jump up and down the spot, and they'll land, and I won't be able to put my shoe widthways in the gap between their feet. And because they don't know that they're crossover running, they have no sense of it. And then we do the drill where, how wide do your feet have to be for you to find the whole breadth of the foot? So it's just jumping down the spot and showing them how narrow it is, and then asking them to correlate that to what they feel pressure-wise under their feet. Then enables them to go to the next step, which is, you could feel the outside of your feet. Now, where do you need to jump up and down to find the whole breadth of each foot? And so they'll find it. They always will. And they'll look down, and it's, hip distance apart. It's always hip distance apart, because if you go wider, and I always encourage them to go wider, then they get the ball of the foot, but now they lose the outside of the foot. So there's this beautiful Goldilocks tracking width. There's a sweet spot. Where do they access the full breadth of each foot? And then they say, I can't possibly run like this. I feel like I've wet myself. So then we do a few drills to open the joint spaces that have got locked down. So these hips, they don't know how to be abducted. So we need a movement pattern that creates hip abduction to show the brain that, look, you can go there. It's fine. Nothing dreadful is going to happen. It's not a stretch. You're not pulling anything. You're not trying to make it bigger. You're inviting space and light into the area. And then it's about when they go into their run, because the motor program is so strong, they can easily revert back. It's about keeping that awareness. So it's padding, so they can jump up on the spot until they find their full breadth of foot, and then they pad forward, gathering pace. And then as soon as they lose their full breadth, they can pause, go on the spot again, find their full breadth, and then carry on. And meanwhile, they are attaching a feeling to the sense of what they're, apart from the fact that they feel like they're running as if they've got a nappy on or they've wet themselves, they're now feeling, it feels like there's less tension in my hips. It feels like I'm just dangling my thigh bones. Oh my goodness, my pelvis feels like I'm Beyonce, because it's now moving as opposed to being stiff. And if they're really resistant, I'll just film them, because if they see that there's invariably hardly any movement, but it feels so magnified when there has been no movement that any movement feels ginormous. And then when they see that they don't look like how they feel they look, then they relax and let it happen. And then before the end of that session, they will not be able to go back to crossover running, because it will feel so crazy it will feel unpleasant, uncomfortable, less efficient, less relaxed. So it's a step-by-step process at the end of which it should feel a nicer place to be. And the frontal cog movement is simply, you imagine yourself in a test tube and you just bend a knee and you don't let the body, the upper body move sideways. You just bend a knee and one hip will slide up because you've bent a knee, and that's the hip that's attached to the knee that's bent has gone down. So the other hip has come up. And if you're in a test tube, you've suddenly created an adduction and an abduction that may not have happened. Or you just slide your pelvis in space across so that the pelvis extends outside an ankle joint, and make a banana in that same shape as if you're a teapot, and just create an adduction and an abduction that way. Just make it really clean. And then a wall becomes really handy again, because you're wanting to either be a test tube bending a knee without any rotation. And so many people need a rotation to access the movement. So therefore they can't move in that plane. So they're stuck with their crossover because they actually can't separate it from the rotation. So they're living in their rotation without the frontal plane separation.
Yeah, that was something that took me a few years to kind of figure out. Is I would have athletes do a lunge and then pair it with a side bend. And some athletes just couldn't do it and would do kind of a weird twisty thing, but I never could put my finger on it until I realized they had no frontal plane movement. And those athletes would invariably be crossover runners as well. And I think really simple thing that I think of is just athletes jumping rope. And so often the tendency is just super narrow tracking width. And then to say, so, and what you were saying is to teach people to basically go subtly wider in that hopping width until you feel you're inside the full like breadth of the transverse arch, or the whole ball of the foot in each foot. And what's that width where you can hop and feel that, and then taking that, using that and running, and then adding in the frontal plane or side bending dynamics to it as well.
Another really easy one is just to edge the feet. So it's as if you're skiing and you just find the long edges of each foot, because for so many people, they have a long edge, but we have two long edges. We have an inside and an outside. So they know one and their brain doesn't know the other. So you can just roll your feet in and find your inside edges, roll your feet out and find your outside edges. Have one, as if you're skiing, have one outside, one inside. Just find those outside edges, the long edges, show the brain these long edges, because what you want for 5/7 of the gait cycle, a quality supination, is contact across the full breadth of the foot as you propel from the ball of the foot to the pinky, because that's your windlass mechanism. This is your so you know the story. Do you know? Shall I tell just quickly the story about the Finnish truck drivers?
Sure.
So they know how many trees to wrap their rope around to winch the payload that has crashed on the frozen lake, because every trunk, every tree, every pulley halves the payload, and we have two in each foot. So when I do this in a workshop, there's lots of wonderful light bulb moments because nobody's ever thought about it. If you imagine your body weight, can you pick your body weight up off the floor? Not many people can pick their body weight up off the floor, but your feet, 1 foot is doing it when you run with every step. It's picking your body weight up off the floor and chucking it into the air, and then you're landing back down on it. And yes, we have efficiencies everywhere, but down at the feet, we have 2 in each foot pulley systems. So we're halving the payload twice when you're on 1 foot. And when you're doing your bilateral calf raises, you're halving the payload 4 times because you've got 4 pulley systems. So if the ball of your foot isn't making good contact with the pinky as well, you are not able. Your pulley systems are null and void. So your effort getting you off the ground is now muscular instead of pulley systems. So it's the importance of the ball of the foot and toe extension and the access of the full breadth of the foot cannot be overstated. This is what makes life easy for us. And we're just not even noticing.
Yeah, noticing is just such. It's been the running theme, and it's something that I think I've talked to you, and everyone listening listens to this. To know the things to notice is just so powerful. But Helen, I think that's all the time I have for the show today. Thank you so much for your time and your thorough explanations and details of this critical aspect of everything we do, just the gait cycle running, and it's so important. And I thank you again for your time with us today. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for letting me natter about my favorite subject.
Thanks for tuning in for another episode. Appreciate you guys being here with us. And that was a fun show. Lots of information and starting to unpack gait, that last on the list of all those main human movements, but the most important one, and one that does take time to learn, understand, and appreciate. And I'm hoping that you guys all have that you guys have more tools in your tool bag and ideas on how to approach that with athletics. All right. As always, if you enjoyed the show, don't hesitate. Leave us a rating or review on iTunes, Stitcher, whatever you're listening to us on. Also, our sponsor, simplyfaster.com. We appreciate them. They've been a longtime supporter of the show. So shout out to simplyfaster.com and everything they're doing. They have an amazing sports performance technology store in their online store. Also a great blog that's updated regularly. So be sure to check them out and support them. And I'm signing off for this week. We'll see you guys around. Have a good one.